Okay, maybe there's one point that needs to be made here, is that unprofitable does not mean worthless.
Thomas, welcome to the studio today.
Thank you for being here.
Now let's hit the nail right on the head here. What makes investing in airports attractive to your mind?
Nothing. Well, it really depends. You have to distinguish between big airports, so-called hub airports, let's say London Heathrow, or small specialized general aviation airports. I would, in Switzerland, for instance, point at Sion or Grenchen. Those are completely different assets. You don't need to worry about the profitability of London Heathrow Airport, but you do need to worry about the small airports because they have very high fixed costs. So it's very difficult to run a small airport profitably, and you have to be quite smart about finding new ways to make money with those airports. And incidentally, that's really our business model, to consult and to advise owners of small airports how to access new revenue streams to make them profitable.
Now, as you say, you're joining us from ADP, but if these type of investments in small airports are risky, why is it something that you're looking at?
Well, because there are some airports that, yes, they are risky, and yes, they are loss-making, but they're also in very attractive locations. In this case, we're talking about an airport about 40 hectares in Surrey. Surrey being a very nice area, rolling hills, a very nice residential area. And as you know, in the UK, there's a dearth of developable land, and the Cameron government has just put in a program to identify additional land, for instance, ex-railway or ex-military land, to develop to fill the gap of homes that the country needs badly to keep the cost of land under control. So we are looking to continue operating this airport for about 2 to 3 years. In the meantime, we will try to get the planning permission in to build about 2,000 homes, at which time we either close down the airport completely or we operate a part of the airport as a heliport to commute to London, and the other part of the airport will be, homes, attractive homes.
So I actually used to live in Surrey, and I recall the sort of the outcry and the different displeasure that there was regarding these big issues. But do you think that with that in mind that, governments should play a more important role in really doing something with these airports which are small, disused, unprofitable, and kind of trying to put it back into the local economy in some way?
Okay, maybe there's one point that needs to be made here, is that unprofitable does not mean worthless. By that I mean there are airports that will never make any money, but they are important for the local economy because a lot of jobs depend on the existence of the airport. So if that is the case, there's a case for governments to actually subsidize the operations of airports. Now, I really look at airports that don't have that added benefit, that really have no raison d'etre. And there really, it's all about either selling it or finding new ways of operating the airport efficiently and profitably. You could, for instance, we've done at some airports, suggest the construction of solar farms because you have vast, plains, biomass, just from the grass that needs to be cut. There's racetracks. There's a lot of things you can do with the airports that not necessarily have a lot to do with aviation itself, but will help the airport be run profitably.
Now, something which has become more kind of prevalent is the public-private partnerships among public airport owners. What are the reasons for this, would you say, in this new trend?
Well, in fact, it is a big trend. In airport investment, in airport acquisition, airport sale, when you look at it from the government side, there's a problem with it, is that it's not very popular. If you have an airport, say we're not London Heathrow, even though it's privately owned, but let's rather look at government-owned airports. It is a political issue to sell off what is considered very often the family silver. So not very popular, but you can make it popular in that you don't sell the airport actually, but you sell the right to use the airport and gain the profits from the airport for a concession period of typically 30 to 40 years. And after that period of time, the asset goes back to the government. So that is politically much more acceptable than an outright sale.
Okay. Now you've spoken about some of the problems with the scope of the land and the different, relationships which are going on with this, but what would you say are the biggest challenges affecting airport owners kind of today and moving forward?
Very much environmental issues. The fact that, rightly so, the emissions issue also affects airports, not only obviously airlines, but because they operate aircraft there, and they're very operated in an unclean fashion, let's say, because if an aircraft engine, a jet engine, is not made to be operated on the ground, it uses a lot of fuel. That's a big challenge, everything around the environment. The other issue is air traffic control. Air traffic in Europe is heavily congested, and it's also very fragmented, because if you fly from here to London, you will go through Swiss, French and UK air traffic zones, and from one zone to the other, air traffic control needs to be handed to other agents, and that makes it very inefficient.
Okay, so how do you think the future looks then?
Well, it depends really. It depends whether we see continued innovation in the sector. We also see whether, for instance, high-speed train will be developed further, because that is a competition to aircraft in shorter distance flights. You see, whether there's improvements in terms of land use, in terms of efficient operations of airports. If all these things are in place, there's a bright future. But if they're not in place, they may, suffer. Not only because of other modes of transportation, but also because of lack of popularity. Nobody really wants to have an airport close to home.
That's very true. I mean, it's so convenient, but at the same time, it's that whole not in my backyard type of scenario. But Thomas, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us today. It's very interesting, and I really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's all from Thomas and myself for the moment, but once again, there is plenty more coming up on Dukascopy TV, so make sure you keep clicking back. Goodbye for now.